joining us, as he's very generous with his time. He's like the only person I think I trust when it comes to any kind of foreign policy issue, because he just doesn't mess around. Stephen Yates, Senior Fellow, America First Policy Institute, and he previously advised the Bush administration as well. So my first question when I was hearing this, Stephen, and good to see you, and I hope you had a wonderful Easter, was, so should we get radiation meds? I mean, is this actually like a thing that's kind of a serious saber rattle to say Russia's going to use nukes on you and you guys better all get ready? What's your take?
Well, a lot of people have been talking about this from the outset of this conflict. I mean, number one, it was assumed that it would be a Russian steamroll over Ukraine, and the Ukrainians surprised us in terms of their resilience and resistance. And the Russians surprised us by apparently not caring for their equipment and picking a bad season, and it's kind of doing the slow grind through all this process. I think it would be irresponsible if you're a national leader to just assume that they won't use some of the scarier articles in their arsenal. At the same time, it's a very, very different prospect when you're talking about use of chemical weapons, biological weapons, and nuclear weapons. These are very different kinds of things. Doesn't mean any of them are acceptable. And a lot of our military folks, my colleague General Kellogg at AFPI, has spoken very clearly about use of chemical weapons. Use at one point was a very clear red line, and President Trump launched tactical missiles into Syria in response, because you have to nip it in the bud to keep there from being further escalation. We haven't really heard anything from the United States or NATO about what they're prepared to do should Russia use those kinds of things. I think that's an important thing that should weigh on their minds. I don't expect it to happen in the near term, but people who are responsible for their countries and their national security don't get the luxury of banking on my assumption.
Now, it's a very, very good point. We're talking to our friend Stephen Yates. You can follow him at YatesComms as well on Twitter. Yeah, the point with the also the ships being the equipment not being taken, not being cared for very well. I was reading conflicting reports that Putin was not made aware initially of how badly Russia was doing, which kind of surprised me, because that was contrary to how he's always been advertised to the world. That was, that's Russian propaganda. He knows everything. I mean, this is a guy who, goes and saves journalists from pumas in the Siberian forest up in the Urals. I mean, this is the guy who goes and dives to find treasures in, the Baltic Sea. But he doesn't know when his military is not taken care of, their equipment is not maintained, and what was supposed to be a 72-hour special operation has turned into like a 2-month thing.
Well, he's also set the world record for the longest table distance between him and any member of his staff in a secure video conference with world leaders. And so there's clearly something else going on in Putin land in recent times that we can't actually assume that he's on top of his game as a former KGB agent. And there apparently are profound disincentives to telling the truth to power in Russia. I mean, even just years back, Putin was responsible for ordering the poisoning of leaders in different countries that left them disfigured or dead. And so if he's willing to do that to foreigners, think of what he would be willing to do to his own fellow countrymen if they're bringing unwelcome and unwanted feedback, where, failure is not an option, comrade, only bring me good news.
That's some Kim Jong-un stuff. I mean, that's what you expect a short stack down there. I thought he was more of a, I guess, a smarter villain, but now really he doesn't seem to be.
Well, he's boxed in. I mean, this cannot really look good for him domestically. We know it doesn't look good for him internationally. And so really it's just a question of how does he grind this out to a point where he can spin some kind of success. Now, he has taken territory that was not previously held by the Russian Federation. When hostilities cease, he still holds that. Right. He can claim that some kind of victory, but at great cost. And so it's really, really hard to see where the off-ramp is. And as much as I think he's a Dr. Evil equivalent, a terrible guy, I think there's a worse one in China. And at the same time, it doesn't do any good to kick sand up on his leg when you need to try to negotiate some kind of an off-ramp. We want to have kind of simultaneous yin and yang. You want to have a demonstration effect that we're going to put our foot down and stop things should you go too far, like use of chemical, nuclear, biological weapons. At the same time, you need to have an off-ramp because United States doesn't want to be permanently vested in an unending, simmering conflict there. Europeans need to do more on that, but we don't want to get sucked into another generation
Right.
trying to keep the Russian bear at bay.
That's a great point. Talking with our friend Stephen Yates at Yates Comes on Twitter. Speaking of China, so there's some Western pressure from reports Associated Press saying that Australia and the United States have been increasing their outreach to the Solomon Islands because it looks like China was trying to sweet talk them to create some sort of military presence on the Solomon Islands, and now apparently we've increased our diplomatic outreach. And there's a trip that was undertaken. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, she was talking with their foreign minister. That would not be good because I don't like them getting any greater ground in the Pacific. And Solomon Islands are not not as close as Hawaii, but they're closer than China. Not thrilled with that. Tell us a little bit about that. Will that pressure work? Will Western persuasion work?
It can work. Solomon Islands are where my grandfather was deployed in the Second World War. It's a strategic territory. It mattered to the Japanese. It matters to people who live in the region, and China certainly will notice it. This is part of a long-standing drama of China trying to buy influence and take toeholds of territory that are of strategic value to them. Obviously, it's not like it's the next Saudi Arabia popping up in the Pacific, and that's why they want to have relations with the Solomon Islands. This is meant to seize the initiative, extend deterrence, interfere with supply lines or the freedom of navigation on the high seas, extending out well beyond China's shores, and meant to counterbalance, say, the U.S. territory in Guam and this quad that the United States has cultivated with Japan, India, and Australia. So some of it is theater. Unfortunately, these small territories and countries get thrown a lot of money their way, and they kind of get blinded in the blizzard, pulling them in both directions. But hopefully it matters enough to the free world to just take care of these places so that we can push China to mind its own business in its own land.
I can see why Australia would be incredibly concerned because that's not at all far away from Australia or New Zealand, if memory of geography serves. I mean, it's like right there by New Caledonia. It's like right there. I mean, they could, if China really wanted to, and they were saber rattling to China or to Australia. I think that was one of the things we talked about just a few months ago.
Yes. No, China's been engaging in a lot of political warfare in places where it used to be more timid or trying to use charm offenses. And yes, getting in close. And, let's not, throw shade in the wrong direction here. I mean, obviously, it's up to us to kind of push in and balance it out. And Australians, first and foremost, it's their backyard. Right. But it's not like China's bringing managerial excellence into this equation. They bring corruption. They bring decrepit infrastructure. You get the pop and sizzle of ribbon cuttings, but then this stuff doesn't last very long. Quality control is not what the CCP is known for. And so, we got to try to make sure that the leaders of these small territories are not bought off. And obviously the people that live there deserve better, but the Aussies are the ones in the driving seat, and we play a supporting role in things like this.
That's a great point. That's a commonality they have with Russia and their horrible. I mean, they can't manage anything as well. That's a common trait there of tyrants. One last quick story. This looking at southern border. Border Patrol reportedly stopped 23 people on the terrorist database in 2021 from coming across the southern border. Bill Malugin, who's based out of LA and has been at the border for the past several months, was in the RGV sector. They said that they had 4 in the RGV sector. That's McAllen, Del Rio, which is west, El Paso sector, Tucson sector, Yuma, 2 in Arizona there. And then, of course, 4 in San Diego, just in California. This seems very purposefully. Let's do a couple in California, Arizona, couple different parts, very well spaced out. That was strategic. Your quick take on that.
Well, it just proves that open borders have consequences, and just turning a blind eye to the efforts that are going on down there. This is not just an American political issue. Yeah. Bad people and good people from around the world are trying to find their way in for whatever their motives are. It is the first job of government and the reason we have a country, to have a border, to have sovereignty, and make it so that there's some meaning to coming legally and coming the right way, and not being able to come easily the wrong way. Just like we say on voting, it should be easy to vote and hard to cheat. It should be easier to come the right way and hard, if not impossible, to come the wrong way with massive consequences. And this administration has turned a blind eye with a lot of woke ideology to back it up. But no other country does this to itself. We're uniquely dumb in my regard in this respect. But if this were the only problem, these are the problems that we know of. Golly. Who knows how many people have gotten through that we don't know of?
That's a terrifying prospect.
Unattributed Afghanistan refugees who, I'm sure there are some good people in that mix, but who knows what else is in that bag of jelly beans.
That's a great point and a very terrifying one at that. Stephen Yates, America First Policy Institute, at YatesComms on Twitter. Follow him for good stuff. Always good to see you, my friend. Happy Easter. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.
You too.